Hello, everyone. I think that it's time to start. We're ready. So I would like to say a big hello to everyone. We are happy that today we have the opportunity to discuss a very important issue of discoverability of European cultural works. We finally find the term discoverability in the conclusions of the Ministers of Culture of 2022 and also in the current work program. This is a very good sign that we have the term discoverability in the EU text. But what do we mean when we say discoverability? We need to define the term because once we have it defined amongst us, we have much more potential to achieve even more for culture in the cultural and creative sectors. This is what we had already started discussing 1 year ago with Carole Tang, that she's now here with us, that we will have the pleasure to see her moderating the first panel, which is about to discuss the importance of discoverability for all sectors. In the second panel, we will discuss how to better promote EU works and make them discoverable, exploring and possible ways of regulation. So, as I see, a very special guest and panelists, I would like to give the floor to my fellow colleague, Niklas NIENASS, to say a few words before we start. Niklas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much and welcome everybody to today's Discoverability Forum. Thank you very much to the European Coalition for Cultural Diversity for helping us organize it, and of course to the CCFG. No, this is a little bit because we are part of the CCFG. So, but we are. I think it's great that we as CCFG did this.
The co-founders of CCFG.
Yeah, that's also true. So, but I think it's good that we put forward with this topic, and the benefits of the CCFG is, of course, that we do it cross-party approach. That we don't make this as a political statement of just one group, but really one where we all stand together and fight together for cultural diversity throughout Europe. And the protection of cultural diversity is so important for Europe and for our society, which is why we're doing this, but which is why we want to talk about discoverability especially. Because the diversity guards the possibilities that we have to express your values, to express your ideas. It also shapes how we see reality, how we come together as a society. And therefore, this diversity is so important, and especially for Europe, with our words being united in diversity, I think. What else shall we say than this is really of utmost importance for our union. And the cultural creation, therefore, is in the center of this, which is why we call it Cultural Creators Friendship Group. We want to focus on this. But at the same time, we have a huge increasement of technology, which is really good in a lot of times. We see the benefits of this. But also, we need to talk about certain drawbacks at a certain time. Because on the one hand, we have the rise of digital platforms that made it easier for a lot of people to find new artists, to find new creations, to get access to whatever the creative content they want from all over the world, which is beneficial. And especially during COVID, this digital tools really helped citizens to communicate to each other, but also to consume and use cultural content and have a good access to culture. At the same time, as I mentioned, it creates new challenges because there is certain, black boxes that we just don't know how it works. I mean, we know how it works, but we don't know how it works, right? And there's one, for example, the algorithmic search and recommendation system, where we know how it works, but we don't know which contributes towards the algorithms, which points are being taken into account, what is valued more over others. And also it brings to another challenge where I think these algorithms don't value the art and creation, they'll value certain paradigms that we have to follow, which leads to weird situation. You might have heard of the 30-second song rule. Now this is from the music sector, where more and more creations are focusing on the first 30 seconds, because the first 30 seconds are mostly credited by the algorithm and are worth whether it's a song that has been listened to or not. And so this changes the way that artists then create in a certain sense. And this is the question, how these digital tools influence also the culture that we have and how fair they really are. During the COVID times, we saw that a lot of questions, when you type in, produce different outcomes. And we don't know, why do we favor this author or this bookshop or this song or this video over others? Why is it more important? How does the algorithm know what my mood is at the moment, what I want to listen next to, and what they suggest to me for music as a next point? And this is just very short insights and very concrete or not specifically enough insights into the big problem that we have here. And the big problem that we have is, of course, the question of how can we make it fairer, that every artist, every creator, every creation has the possibility to being found in a meaningful way. How can we make sure that people participating in this know what is happening? One thing is, for me, would be very important to open the black box and at least know which algorithms are at the moment using what data and how to influence that data, and at least have a democratic discussion about the criteria that is influencing the algorithms and so on. And we need to understand the digital ecosystem more, and we need to support local platforms, because what we see at the same time is we have 4 major big tech giants that are monopolies in a way that are now influencing our digital behavior as a whole, which is at least highly critical. And therefore, it will then bring the question to us as a society, but to us as lawmakers, concretely, whether we need to find new ways to regulate platforms, whether we need to give a new framework for smarter, fairer and transparent access, and for a clearer discoverability of cultural content. And this event is an amazing opportunity to bring together all these views of yours and of experts, to exchange in detail about what discoverability really means and how we can improve the implementation. And it brings together the experts that have the ideas, that have the understanding, and therefore can provide more and good ideas. And I wish you all the best with the 2 panels that are yet to come. I hope it is insightful, it is fruitful, and it will bring us some more clarity and some more ideas for the future. So thank you very much for coming today. And with these, I can give over to Alexis again, and we can go and start with our first panel.
Thank you very much, Niklas. I would like to refer to Mr. Papadimoulis, our Vice President of the European Parliament, that he's now here with me, with us. Thank you very much for coming, Mr. Papadimoulis. If you want to take the floor is yours. We will go further, and I would like to give the floor and the panel, actually, to the Chair of the European Coalition of Cultural Diversity, Carol Tang. Please come with us. Thank you very much. We will leave you alone on the panel, so you can have it on your own. Thank you.
Thank you both very much indeed, and a very big welcome to all of you. I think, first of all, I'd like to invite the speakers on this panel to come up and join me before I say a few words. So if Anke Schierholz, Heidi Weiler and Detlef Bauer and Catherine Magnon could come and join me on the platform, that would be terrific. Thank you all for joining me here. I just want to give a short introduction about the European coalitions. We were formed in 2005 as an informal network, bringing together 11 national coalitions in a federation. And we bring together professionals from cultural and creative organisations, from cinema, audiovisual, performing arts, editing, music, visual arts and multimedia. And we cover all professions in the artistic and cultural sectors, such as authors, producers, composers, editors, artist interpreters, broadcasters, and many, many more. And we work in Brussels to promote the 2005 UNESCO Convention, which seeks to enhance and promote the diversity of cultural expression. We defend, for example, a cultural exemption in trade agreements when we feel cultural diversity will be threatened. And we defend creators' social rights, authors and artists' freedom of movement, and authors' rights in general. To this end, the ECCD supports and encourages European cultural policies that we believe are necessary to underpin the creative industry, to underpin creators and our diverse cultures, to ensure that they thrive and prosper. We are driven by the desire to protect creation and allow diverse creative works to reach their audience. So the coalitions have been following for a long time now the discussions on discoverability, particularly where we saw this discussion take place in Canada through regular exchanges we have had with them through the International Federation of Coalitions for Cultural Diversity based in Montreal. We're very pleased that we hope in a couple of months Canada will adopt BC11, in which it is specifically mentioned that the Canadian regulator must actually follow up on the whole idea of discoverability. So we watch Canada with interest. As introduced by our MEPs, Mr. GEORGOULIS and Mr. NIENASS, discoverability refers more precisely to the online availability of a creative work and its ability to be found amongst a vast array of other content, particularly when you aren't necessarily specifically looking for it either. A series that appears continuously on Netflix homepage, a song in the recommendations of Spotify, a book on Amazon, a painting in the suggestion of Google's images are just some of the examples that result from recommendation tools, the use of metadata, and the filtering of online works. They all fall under the heading of discoverability. And sometimes those words, those phrases seem quite anonymous, but behind all of that, there are in fact people with instructions as well. I'm sure that's something that will come up. According to this definition, we can say that while discoverability impacts each sector differently because of the role played by algorithms on the various distribution platforms, all of us today and all our organisations are concerned by this issue. We heard mention already that the Council of Ministers of Culture in April last year decided that discoverability should be a strategic objective. The Commission's own work plan has also therefore made discoverability an objective. So I'm very happy that we today have the opportunity to host this event. I'm thrilled to be here as a partner of the Cultural Creators Friendship Group, which bringing together MEPs across political groups. Having been in this Parliament since 1980, I couldn't have been more overjoyed than when our colleagues here today, with other colleagues, came up with this friendship group. It is long overdue and we look forward to a lot of further cooperation. I would just, to give a last word on context, we have to think in the audiovisual field about the Audiovisual Media Services Directive, because therein there is some kind of an attempt at discoverability by addressing the question of prominence of audio-visual works. I'd like to emphasise when at a moment where the Parliament, the Cultural Committee is looking at the implementation of that directive, that it imposes only a minimum quota, not a maximum quota, I stress, of European works that should be in video-on-demand platforms, but very especially the obligation to enhance those works. And I think from what we see, we need more to be done, particularly within individual member states. So I'm very happy to launch this forum with the CCFG within this context of discoverability of diverse European cultural content. And the ECCD, the European coalitions, are here with you all representing all the cultural and creative sectors. And I feel this panel really brings together a number of sectors. I'm very happy that you're all here today. And I'd like to just briefly introduce the panellists. Online, we are going to have Romain Delassus, who is head of the digital department at the French Ministry of Culture. He joined the French Ministry of Culture 5 years ago, originally to steer through what was known as the Culture Pass. And his team is now working on two main missions to support and accelerate the internal IT modernisation of the industry, of the ministry, and to oversee the digital transformation of the cultural world. He is going to give us an overview of the French Quebec mission on online discoverability of French-speaking content that published its conclusions in 2020. A recent call for tender was also launched between the French and the Quebec government. I will come back to him. I'd then like to say hello to Anke and welcome Anke, President of European Visual Artists. Anke is a trained lawyer with a PhD in copyright and legal director of WG Bildkunst since 1999. You're here today as President of the EVA, the European representation of 29 European Visual Arts Collective Management Organisations, CMOs, a board member of the OLA, where visual CMOs cooperate worldwide to offer one-stop shops for digital licenses. And you also represent visual artists on the board of IFRO, the International Federation of Reproduction Rights Organisations. Heidi, you are Executive Director at the European Theatre Convention, the largest network of publicly funded theatres in Europe with 57 members in 30 countries. And you are going to share later the main challenges and opportunities of discoverability in European theatre. If I don't cover all the amazing things that our panel have done, please refer to our website where we have more fuller biographies. But Detlef Bauer is spokesperson for the Product Metadata Interest Group of the German Publishers and Booksellers Association. You represent an interest group that's been dealing with requirements for good metadata in the book and media industry and with all fields of metadata application in online and what we call old-fashioned brick and mortar stores since 2017. Catherine Magnon, Head of Unit of DG Education and Culture at the European Commission, a very distinguished career. You've been dealing with European cultural cooperation since 2011. Following the work plan for culture 2023 to 2027, the Commission is preparing a report on discoverability, and you're going to be sharing with us the first lines of research and how you intend to address the whole subject. But moving on, I hope we're going to be joined, first of all, by Romain Delassus, Head of Digital Department at the French Ministry of Culture.
Thank you very much. I hope that you can hear me okay.
That seems fine. Thank you, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So first of all, I would like to sincerely apologize for not being able to join you physically for this forum. I really regret it. And I hope that my remote and virtual presentation will still be somewhat comprehensible. So, as it was already stated, my name is Romain Delassus. I'm the head of the digital service of the French Ministry for Culture. It's a quite recent team that I've had the chance to build for the last 2 years, and which has two main missions. We combine the role of an IT department and the role of a digital innovation department, and I believe this is actually an important fact, because I'm convinced that in today's world we can no longer do IT without thinking about and understanding the end usages that we serve, and also that we cannot be credible as an administration in a role of supporting digital innovation if we don't know what it means to operate information systems. And I'm telling you this because I think it's related to our panel theme. In my opinion, discoverability is both a very technical and a major public policy issue. And the two sides are closely linked. And this is the reason why in France, it's the digital service of the Ministry for Culture that is in charge of what we call the Ministerial Administration of Cultural Data. So I won't get too specific about this mission unless there are questions, but I want to concentrate on the question that was given, and that is to broadly explain what I understand of the concept of this term discoverability, and well to introduce this joint mission that we conducted in 2019 with the Quebec Ministry for Culture about the online discoverability of French language cultural content. So it was a mission that during this mission we interrogated more than 200 experts from institutional, from the industry, and from the economic sectors on both sides of the Atlantic. And well, the report is public. You can find it on our website. The report is in French, but I'm pretty sure that with all the wonders of artificial intelligence today, all of you can now understand it. So the first thing, as always, is the definition. It was already given, but to put it simply, we use the concept discoverability to refer to two important things. The first one is the availability of the content on the internet, which means that you can see, read, listen, or watch this content from anywhere. And the second important thing is if I can put it that way, the searchability of this content. I'm pretty sure this word does not exist, but what I mean is that you can search and find the content, and as it was stated, what we are actually even more interested in is that you might even find this content even though you were not specifically looking for it. So this definition actually, it looks pretty simple, but it embeds a lot of things, and it's also based on a number of assumptions about what's going on in today's digital world and its impact on the cultural and creative industries. About those assumptions, in my opinion, there may be three main elements to have in mind to understand the impact of IT on cultural practices. The first one is that we're seeing an explosion of demand for cultural practices in the digital world. This is something that we've been observing for 10, 15 years, and that has significantly accelerated since the successive crises we've seen in the last years, and in particular the health confinement. So to put it simply, we have more and more people that spend more and more time on the internet, and sure, we do it for work or now for administrative procedures, but mainly people do it to consult media, to read books, to listen to music, and now even to visit museums. And the second important thing is that at the same time as there is this explosion of demand, there's an explosion of supply. This is because digital technology lowers the barriers to entry, and well, this means we've seen new generation of creators, a new form of creations, and new distribution channels. Just think about well, social networks. They allow more or less anyone who produces an original content to reach huge audiences, for better or for worse. And the third element is just as important as the first two. It's the feeling that this is all just the beginning. There are now strong and lasting new expectations from audiences, and the development of immersive technologies, artificial intelligence, or more recently blockchain technologies will probably have even more an even stronger impact on the processes of creation, dissemination, and relationships with audience in the year to come. So those three elements, they raise a lot of questions about the future of our cultural public policies that we started to address in France, because those policies were invented in a world where art and creation was a form of scarcity that we need to protect and then disseminate to as many people as possible. And well, in the digital world, we're now in a world where the real scarcity is the available brain time, and there's a very intense battle that is taking place to conquer it. And so this concept of discoverability, it captures all that by saying that if you want to exist as a cultural institution in today's world, your content needs to be available online, and it also needs to be created and distributed in such a way that it makes it up to the surface of the various platforms and algorithms that are used by billions of people. And this is something that everyone struggles to achieve. It's actually very difficult. And so to get back to our joint mission with the Quebec Ministry, we identified 12 main levers that we can act to enhance the discoverability of cultural content. And I won't get into the details of these 12 levers, but we classified them, in two main categories. The first one is adapting the content itself. So in this category, you find the most obvious lever, if you remember the definition that we gave you of this concept of discoverability. The first part of the definition was availability. So of course, the first lever is, well, to put your content online. And this is actually more easy said than done, because there still are significant barriers to putting certain categories of content online. In particular, audiovisual work, live performance, or visual arts. Just think about, two examples, the complexity of copyright management, or the important cost to digitalize something and to distribute it in the internet, and the lack of business model in most cases. This is just two examples of barriers to put your content online. And the second part of the definition was the searchability. So this is a little bit more complex, but in order to do that, it was stated just before me, you need to use what is called metadata, which you can see as a description of your content, so title, author, language, etc. This is the very important things to ensure that your content is taken into account by the algorithm and search engine. But in order to do that correctly, you also need to have models and taxonomies so that the metadata that you use are understood by the rest of the world. But metadata is just a tool, and it's not everything. So we emphasize on the fact that you also need to implement specific marketing strategies, which is something that, at least in France, our cultural institution can sometimes find dirty, or at least that they vastly underinvest. There's a saying that in a digital environment, you need to spend 20% of your resource and energy to create your content and 80% of your time to distribute it. And well, in our cultural institution, at least the public one, the ratio is often reversed. So these are the five first levers: put your content online, use metadata, implement a marketing strategy, and well, take into account local specificities. And to do that, you need also to exploit usage data in order to increase business intelligence through this usage data. And to finish, just because I don't want to take time from the other participants, but the second category was entitled Adapting the Ecosystem Itself to Digital Practices, and it regroups the other 7 levers that we find are important, which is training cultural actors in those new digital practices. which is also to pool thoughts and solution by bringing together players in the same sector or in a multi-sectoral manner. It's also something that's actions that need to be directed to the general public in order to raise awareness on the role of and the functioning of algorithm. And for the French ministry, one of the important levers is to acquire just a better understanding of how this discovery process of content work, and then when we better understand it, to defend it at the international level. So this is basically what you are doing today, and adapt the regulatory frameworks. There it is. I hope I wasn't too long. So once again, you can find all of this on the ministry website. Sorry, and I'll be happy to answer question, or you can contact me directly if you have any questions or even solutions to offer.
Thank you very much, Romain. Romain seems to have immediately disappeared. Is he still online or not? I just had a very brief question, but I can just express it perhaps as a hope that the work that he described that's being done, I hope it's being shared. It's being shared certainly with us today, but I hope it's being shared with the European Commission and the Council. And who knows, it might provide some kind of model for us more broadly at the European level. But I'm sure we'll come back to some of the things that he shared with us today. I'd like to invite Anke to speak, who's going to offer us an analysis on how discoverability impacts the visual arts.
So, thank you very much. It's perfect. Thank you so much. I don't need. I'm talking for Eva, which has already, thank Carol, been introduced so well that I don't need to lose an additional word on that. Well, actually, the discoverability and the visibility question for visual artists is both a chance and a challenge. It is a chance because it is extremely important for artists who are usually working alone, who are not part of an industry like musical authors are, where you have an industry who does the promoting for you. They are self-promoters. They have to make sure that they are found because visibility ensures new contacts, and these contacts are essential both for cooperation, for licensing, for working out new projects. And then they are, of course, not only working with one source of discoverability. There is the entire kind of bundle of chances to be seen, to be found, from own website over social media to actually sometimes working with picture agencies. And a very important aspect for fine art artists actually is to be found within collections and museums, because there a certain esteem for the work has already been expressed by taking up the work into the collection. And then we come, that leads me immediately, okay, that was wrong. That leads me immediately to the challenges of the internet and of the visibility question for visual artists, because often they are told, visibility is so important for you. So be glad that we make your works visible, that we make you as a person discoverable in the internet. But visibility alone doesn't pay a rent. And it doesn't create an income. So what we have to make sure is, at least where we are having commercial users or where we are having cultural institutions as intermediaries between the artists and the general public, that the artists need to receive a remuneration. Only if they are remunerated, they can, and you can take the entire value chain. Only if there is a remuneration, you can be sure that the cultural diversity can really unfold within the internet. And the problem is, so a huge step forward has been made with the DSM directive and the possibility to license out-of-commerce works. There we do have the chance to license cultural heritage institutions like museums, like archives, who are presenting their collections, and by presenting their collections are presenting the author's works. And why is this so important? You have to know that up to 95% of museum collections and archive collections are not on show, but are in the
basement?
In the basement, yeah, in the cellar, so to say. Storage is the word.
Is that 90?
Up to 95%. Because museums and cultural heritage institutions, they do take their job serious, but the walls are not so broad that you can show all that you collect. And that is important. And it is important that the works in storage too contribute to the cultural diversity. But you have to pay for it, I think. And the directive gave us good chances to license, simply because we can now extend licenses to those authors who are not members of a collecting society, and this radically reduces the bureaucratic effort of licensing. So it's a very big step that was made in this directive, and thanks here for the...
Can you tell us about the directive, just the name?
The digital DSM, Digital Single Market Directive.
Yeah.
So a huge thank you to both Parliament and to the Commission. This was a big step forward for us. Yet, what we are seeing, and this is something that makes it really difficult for visual artists, or I think for artists in general, authors, is that we see a tendency by the legislator to say what is in the internet may be used unless there is a machine-readable rights reservation. We do have this expressly for text and data mining within the DSM directive, where the only way to prevent a work to be harvested for artificial intelligence training, and that's what text and data mining is used for, is to have a machine-readable rights reservation. We have a similar decision by the European Court of Justice in the decision we fought, where we were quarreling with German Digital Library about the necessity to block framing or embedding images in other websites, where the European Court of Justice also said the only way to reserve rights in the internet is a machine-readable rights reservation. And when we are looking at the discussions about artificial intelligence, about works being used for training of artificial intelligence because they were harvested by text and data mining, we will probably see that the European authors are in a situation which is very unfavorable as compared to the US situation at the moment, because thank God the US didn't do much in this area, and it was only Europe who thought that text and data mining needs to have an exception in the law, and this is, in our opinion, a serious attack on copyright in this quickly developing digital environment. So it's not a surprise that the lawsuits against artificial intelligence all are in the US, and there is not yet one emerging in Europe. It might be that there's coming something, but the obstacle is really high. It's really difficult to overcome this, Article 4, which allows text and data mining for commercial purposes without any remuneration and without any license. So what is happening in this context is that we are seeing a complete change of paradigm in copyright in the digital environment. In the classical environment, it is obvious who uses a foreign work which is protected needs a permission, and if there is no such permission, the use potentially is a copyright infringement. And this is completely different in the internet. In the internet, there seems to be a tendency to say, if you're stupid enough to give your works into the internet, and if you don't protect them, then they are just free for everybody to use. And this is not only, I think, in conflict with the Berne Convention. It is actually, it is making it's having a severe impact on discoverability. Because if you have to fence your works in, if you don't want them to be freely used commercially for whatever uses, this will certainly have an impact on discoverability. And it mainly has an impact on discoverability because we don't have any standards for machine-readable reservations. There are no such standards. You can, of course, write into the metadata, no TDM, please, but the question is whether this will be respected by the machines who are harvesting the internet. So if we want to have discoverability, if we want to have cultural diversity, we must make sure that the internet is a safe place and is a safe place for authors and is not a safe place for entertainment industry who wants to have a grip on works and wants to use them freely. And it's not only entertainment industry is a bit a too friendly word for, I guess it all comes down to the GAFAs again. It's the big American tech industry who are trying to convince legislators that freedom means no protection at all. And no protection at all does not mean freedom, it just means no cultural diversity because the internet is not safe. And this actually is not working anymore. Okay. Here we are. Okay, I'm through. It's slower than I thought. So just a final word, this choice between discoverability and potential loss of copyright is actually absolutely unfair to the authors. So we beg the European legislator to return to this concept of who wants to use a work in whatever way, needs a permission. And go back the way from machine-readable reservation. That's something that's been told us by the tech industries, and it sounds so incredibly modern, but in fact it's not. It's hostile to authors and the culture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anke. If I can ask you all, we need to keep quite tight to the time. We're going to be having a discussion between us and with everybody here. I'd like to hand over now to Heidi Wiley, Executive Director at the European Theatre Convention.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you also for the European Coalitions for Cultural Diversity and the Cultural Creators Friendship Group for organizing this very important forum. I think it's really one of the key issues that we as cultural sectors are facing these days, these decades to come. And it's been fascinating to hear what you've been telling about this one. So,
yes, that's fine.
I don't touch anything. Good. So I said it's been really fascinating to hear what you've been saying from the visual arts, because there are a lot of crossover aspects with my own sector, the theatre. So thanks a lot for the great introduction also, Carol. I'm Heidi Wiley, the Executive Director of the European Theatre Convention, and slightly similar to what you've said, Anke. Hold on, I push the button. We are also a pan-European network of publicly funded theatres present in over 30 countries across Europe. And what we do is we help our theatres make performances across borders together to develop their skills, and also we advocate for support for our sector. Across this presentation, I will look at 5 key points, like what we've heard this earlier. What's the key question? What does discoverability mean for us in the theatre sector? How do we work on discoverability at ETC? Hold on. And how are we framing this until now? And then I will look at specific examples of a digital platform for European theatre, prosperotheatre.tv. Obviously also the challenges of this work, and I have some recommendations for the future. So, what does discoverability for theatre mean in Europe? What is it that concerns our sector? Well, generally speaking, it means introducing theatre audiences and professionals to productions from companies, places and countries that they didn't hear and know about. Most audiences find out what is happening with local productions or may look into work by very well-known international artists and companies. We therefore want to give these audiences and also professionals access to theatre performed in other cities, regions or European countries. It also means facilitating the discovery of online or digital-first theatre from across the continent. Lots of this process relies on basic tools, like we've already heard here today: websites, SEO, social media. We find that the most horizontal platform for discoverability for theatre is social media, where the quality photo, interview, trailers, behind-the-scene content can be consumed in any location at any time. And from the sharing side, it's important for theatres to configure the specific metadata for their website using open graph tags to ensure website links display properly on, for example, Facebook or other platforms. Relevant guidelines should be used when sharing on other platforms like Twitter too. And you might think this is very basic knowledge, but I think when speaking about our sector, that's still also where we are in terms of speaking about this subject. Because we work initially with live audiences also. So this is something to keep in mind. As ETC, we use our connection to the term European theatre to attract interest in our work and a broader sense of European theatre more generally. Our approach is more focused on awareness raising rather than offering a detailed listing of every theatre production happening across Europe for audiences to discover. So our tools, such as the online library that we have on our ETC website, include digital theatre performances from theatres across and the continent with access to digitized information on European theatre plays. Of note, there are over 1,000 plays from now and in the recent past. And we know this can resonate with European audiences, as one of our most recent, hold on, this is also, sorry, going too fast. One of our most recent project called Renaissance reached 140,000 people. So you see here some examples of what I mentioned, what attracts people. So it's really also about nice images right now. Those are the online libraries and the Renaissance project. And then I said we are doing advocacy work to increase digital accessibility of theatre, such as joining a new research committee coordinated by Harvard University to develop guidelines for policymakers on streaming and online performance context, particularly also, and that's maybe something new, for people with disabilities. So it's really also about widening the access to enjoy the art. So we are analyzing how theatres use digital work across Europe and how this changed before, during, and after the COVID-19 pandemic. And there's currently a piece of research called the Digital Theatre and Digital Business Model study that is in the making will be published in spring. And the first finding of this digital theatre study show that digital theatre ticket sales grew by 772% between 2019 and 2020 and remained stable throughout 2021 in terms of total digital tickets sold. We are also then, as you see here, participating in other groundbreaking artistic work on projects such as the Acute, which is testing the capacities of theatres to make actually digital productions. So our discoverability work in the sector is really at a relatively new stage and very early in its progress, but the work is very important to us and it's strongly related to exploring new business models, like we heard, that we are developing for theatre and for the future. And the sector is very different also from what we will hear in a moment from the books and music market, for instance, which has been comfortable in working and trading their product online for decades. So we are more similar to be compared with museums. We do online and distribution work for a sector which is, and this is really crucial to consider, mostly based on in-person experiences. So I come to the example of the Prospero Theatre TV, because obviously when COVID hit, doing the new theatre Netflix was in everyone's minds, or was talked about a lot. So let me tell you a bit more about this specific theatre platform, online platform, that you can right now discover across Europe. And to my knowledge, I think it's one of the few or the only one that works across the continent. It's a streaming platform for European theatre. It's still in its infancy. It was launched last year in autumn. It currently hosts around 50 pieces of content, including theatre recordings, documentaries, and interviews. It's free to use, and I think that's also a very important issue to underline, because it's been a huge discussion within this consortium. And the main recordings include subtitles in 9 languages. It was created as part of a European-funded project, Prospero Extended Theatre, and is led by one of the ETC member theatres, Théâtre de Liège, and I think the project manager will be joining us in the discussion later. And it brings together 9 theatres and a media from Europe. And this example is very interesting because now it comes also to what you've said earlier, because it highlights one of the main challenges also for us when introducing audiences to digital work from around Europe. It's the artist's rights. Once a production moves from a stage to potentially being beamed around every European country, new stakeholders emerge. And that's a challenge for theatre, particularly as the sector typically has less income than larger cultural or media fields. And the platform has dealt with this. It actually produced, you see it here, a guide for how other theatres can do this, working across borders in paying attention to the artist's rights. And that's now available in the 27 countries of the European Union. Yes. So there's a skills opportunity for producers to really better understand digital requirements in broadcast, and similarly also an opportunity to make subtitled theatre in a digital form available for audiences across national borders. And now, obviously, let's get to the challenges, and that's everyone here on the panel is obviously also competing for the attention of the same people with all our various products. So people, what you said also, Niklas, likely to attend a theatre performance may instead, maybe in the future, be looking through the vast array of outstanding content in another field, like a new Netflix series to watch, or performances from their favorite music band, a new exhibition to attend. And to have a successful discoverability in theatre, one would really need to attract these audiences to watch the various performances across the sectors to have some cultural experience. But what is crucial is really, are there economic means for these new cultural online distribution channels to compete with the existing ones and create a new niche for specific needs to innovate the cultural ecosystem in a sustainable way? So, and to come to the... conclusions, to sum up, I think really the first is about discoverability, linking between the cultural sector. It's crucial. When people watch a film or a TV series at home or listen to their band, we could train the algorithms to offer them similar experiences from other sectors. And from a more regulatory, cross-border and financial perspectives, our colleagues, especially from the Prospero platform, highlighted the need to call for European facilitation to secure the management of the authors' rights related to the recording and broadcasting of performing arts, and to harmonize this regulation between the EU countries. Call for funding for theatres for the production of theatre films, so there is a more high-quality digital content available, and to pay the artists and their rights. And they also call for a guide to help cultural institutions manage the fiscal and in particularly the VAT questions related to the development of online commercial activities in the EU. Well, that's the topics on the table from our part, and I look forward to discuss this. Thank you all.
Thank you very much indeed. As with all meetings like this, we're falling just a little bit behind. I'm now moving on to Detlef Bauer. And Detlef, you're going to share with us a clearer picture, shall we say, on metadata exchange, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting also the book sector to this very inspiring event and for organizing it here in Brussels. We are happy to be here. We are the old man, or I am the old man here in the room, because we have been doing discoverability issues and searchability issues now for 25 to almost 30 years, because when Amazon started in Europe in '94, we still had, we didn't have online databases running, but we had electronic catalogs, and we were supplying a lot of data to our dealers all over the different countries. But a lot has happened in the last years, so let's have a look what's crucial to us. Contributors of metadata and their users in the book trade will be the first slide I show to you. Metadata are the key to discoverability and visibility of literary works and scholarly works, at least as our world is designed today. We have some big changes ahead. This thing is playing tricks. Now it went back. Our understanding of discoverability of European literary works will be the next presentation I do. And then we have a look at big players in the book metadata distribution in Europe and internationally. And the last slide will bring us back to the questions we raise here, the audiences and the professionals, issues, opportunities, and problems. Wonderful. You think that's better? Okay. We have different sectors contributing metadata into the metadata line. Authors, illustrators, scientists, they create the first layer of metadata and they give them to all the rest in the line. Publishers and self-publishers do the same. They also have quite high quality metadata by now, and they are investing heavily in this sector to be present in all the platforms they want to be. Then we have wholesalers and aggregators, especially aggregators in digital distribution and wholesalers still in the physical distribution. I want to remind you all that although we have now for 15 years also download content in the market, in Germany, for instance, downloads are only about 6% of the book market still, and the rest is still done physically. So availability and physical availability and logistics is still at the heart of discoverability and searchability in our market. Then we have dealers, online and offline. doing their job, and especially the offline dealers did a brilliant job during the Corona crisis and sold a lot of books through their outlets and sold a lot of books through their independent online bookshops, because every medium and mid-sized bookshop in at least Germany and Austria, they have their own online representation, and they have then very strong logistics behind it. And then we have the readers. They also contribute to good metadata because they write reviews, they give their views of books and works, they enable all the platforms just to select new content and to offer new content to readers that are unsure what they want to read next. Metadata is the key to discoverability. We have different forms of metadata like keywords, descriptive metadata, browsing trees, and supporting resources like pictures or look inside. That's all usually supplied by the publishers, now in very high quality, at least if we look at the big and medium-sized publishers. Then we have the wholesalers, and they have sales rankings, and they have availabilities, and they can tell you whether you will get the book next day or in 3 days. And then we have the dealers. They have the platforms, and they have user-generated content in the platforms, and they have the reactions of their customers coming back to them. And by using this, you can continuously improve metadata and visibility, and you can recommend new titles based on metadata and customer behavior analysis. And the next step we are looking at is full text analysis based on data analytics and machine reading, which is less a threat to us, but a chance. We have to keep in mind that if you look at the big players in the market, they have everything we see here in the picture. Especially, they have all the traffic. And the traffic generates new, improved, better metadata, and the traffic generates new insights, what's upcoming, and what will be trending, and what will be the next big seller in the market. And only if you have a lot of traffic, and that's the problem of the small and medium-sized dealers, if you have a lot of traffic, you can have the same insights as the big platforms. Our understanding of discoverability of European literary works, in easy words, all sorts of publications can be easily found by consumers and professionals as well. Good discoverability and visibility of books result in better sales and profits for creators, publishers, and booksellers, online and offline. Inspiring and attractive presentation of products and understanding the needs of customers is helping consumers to make the right choices. Creating equal opportunities of visibility and comprehensive, easy-to-understand standards and rules for reporting metadata in unrestricted online exchange, and therefore maintaining high catalog standards by presenting a diverse as possible offer of books in all European languages to the public. Achieve potentials of optimizations on all trade levels by applying up-to-date technical methods and means. And last but not least, translate regulations of the EU or national legislations into instructions for all sellers to inform consumers through reliable metadata of their rights and choices, especially if you look at the European Accessibility Act. If we have a look at the European situation, you see we have really big national markets still. They are divided along borders, I'd say. You have 2 million of French titles or 1.6 million of Spanish. You have a lot of German and Italian, and you have millions of other European languages in catalogs that are not joined. If you look at the English language market, you have two big players in the UK and in the US, and in the UK a smaller one. One is Nielsen Book Data and one is Bokeh Book Data. They all provide you with 45 million of products with excellent metadata, and they are easy to access. You have to pay a price, and the price is rising every year, but the quality is improving daily, I'd say, and we don't have a central aggregator in the European markets. So you are well able to buy French language and German language books at national bookstores or at the big platforms, but it's very complicated to get hold on Serbian books or Romanian books or Greek books in Central Europe, for instance, or in Northern Europe. And that's still a problem. The audiences, the consumers of all European countries should have easy access to a broad variety of content in their preferred language, regardless of country of residence, through central platforms and local dealers as well. The popularity of English language books within the European public is high level and growing rapidly. And as consumers' attention economy is limited, EU content is likely to be losing ground. Given the importance of more and more diverse literary and scientific landscape and a growing long-tail, content of best solutions for short-term availability are print on demand, download, and selected stock. In all those three possibilities, you are able to supply a book within 24 hours. Data analytics-driven next generation of metadata is ready and will change metadata management in the next 2 to 3 years significantly. Investment in young professional skills to gain understanding of artificial intelligence-driven metadata production and the function of algorithms behind discoverability on different platforms is key to success. And last but not least, we need to maintain the interests of the EU countries and international organizations for defining metadata standards. And we should aim at permanent online exchange with specialists across national borders to harmonize markets further. That's from me. Thank you.
Niklas, thank you very much. Already our three speakers have given us an enormous amount of food for thought and a great deal of information and proposals. And I think they are particularly looking towards you, Kahu. We welcome now your contribution. Where the European Commission has got to so far. And I hope you will welcome all the information you are receiving today and that it will contribute to your work, of course.
Thank you very much, Carol. Yes, of course, we are extremely grateful to the speakers that just spoke, but also, first and foremost, to you, to the European Coalition for Cultural Diversity and to the French groups for cultural creators, because the study we are going to embark upon is really, has to be done in collaboration with you and for you, for the sectors and for the European public, and certainly not against them. And we are at the very beginning of our journey, so that's why it's so important to have this forum today. And we hope it's the first of a series of similar forums to discuss the findings as we progress along our study. So let me first just remind something that we all know, but still it's important, that safeguarding cultural diversity is a key value to all the member states and European institutions, and it's a pillar on which we are building our cultural policies, or what we're trying to develop. As you know, there is the Article 3 in the Treaty on the European Union that recalls that the aim of the European Union is to respect its rich cultural and linguistic diversity. Then we also have Article 167 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union that invites us to take cultural aspects in account in all actions, in particular in order to respect and promote the diversity of the culture of the EU. Finally, as you know, the EU is a party to the 2005 UNESCO Convention on the promotion and first protection and then promotion of cultural of the diversity of cultural expressions, and that's the only UNESCO convention to which we are party. So certainly the direction is clear, but the world has changed and has become much more complex, as we've just heard, with the appearance of internet and its use for the consumption, production, dissemination of cultural products. So we have a new call to look into discoverability on digital, in the digital world. But we're not starting from scratch. We're not starting from scratch. First, I'd like to recall that cultural diversity has been recognized as part of the European Declaration on Digital Rights and Principle. That was the EU vision for the digital transformation, and there, this declaration reflects the EU values, promotes a sustainable human-centric vision for the digital transformation, and it's clearly stated that these transformation should also promote cultural and linguistic diversity. Then, as you all know, we've got the Audiovisual Media Service Directive that aims to promote cultural diversity in the audiovisual media landscape. You have recalled in your introduction that the way it's being implemented is not fully satisfactory, but that's one example that we can quote of what has been done and achieved, or still needs to be better achieved so far. Then we have modernized the copyright legal framework to secure a fairer marketplace for online content, including as regards the remuneration of authors and performers. Now we've heard today that the situation is far from being simple, that there are still many issues, but also that discoverability online is so closely linked to this issue of copyright and licensing and fair remuneration of author. It really goes hand in hand almost. So that's something that we will have to take into account when conducting the study. Then in 2015, we launched the Music Moves Europe initiative to promote a better support for the music sector. And here again, the aim is not only to help the music sector become more sustainable, but also maintain and enrich its diversity. And in this context, I'd like to mention that we have managed to, in our crusade for mainstreaming culture in all EU policies, and my team is here with me. I mean, that's something on which we spend a lot of energy. And one of our successes was, for example, to have more research projects in Horizon Europe dealing with important topics such as remuneration, online issues, and also discoverability. And there are two Horizon projects two projects funded by Horizon Europe on music. One is called Fair Muse, and the other is called Open Muse, that are going to tackle the issue of streaming, algorithm, and the competitive music ecosystem. Also, when it comes to cultural heritage, making cultural heritage discoverable is one of the objectives of the initiatives that were launched, such as the data space on cultural heritage that was awarded recently to the European Foundation. So there have been actions taken, but it's absolutely insufficient. We are totally aware of that. And it's great that there is this call for action and to do more in the new work plan for culture, covering the years 2023 to 2026. The recommendation on discoverability that we have in the work plan for culture builds on Council conclusions that were adopted under the French presidency of the EU in April 2022, that you've also quoted at the beginning of this panel. Those Council conclusions were inviting the Commission and the Member States to build a European strategy for the cultural and creative industries ecosystem, and there are three references indeed to discoverability. So now the study. We are tasked with this study. We are at the very beginning of our journey. We are now drafting the terms of reference that will be published, we hope, in the middle of the year, and then the contract will be awarded, and then the work will start. So first results to be expected next year at best, 2024. What will be the scope of the study? Well, the objective is, discoverability of cultural content online, to increase it. But it's much more complex than that, because of course, it could not be, discovery in itself is not simple. But then we've been tasked with, with additional challenges. What are those challenges? Well, first we want to cover all sectors, of course, apart from audiovisual, since audiovisual is more advanced. But the task is to cover all sectors, all other cultural sectors than audiovisual, so certainly also the theatre sector, the book sector, and there is a specific mention in particular to the book sector and the music sector. So a particular focus on the book and music sector. Now, we have to do that we have to look at those issues of discoverability through, of course, the study will look at algorithm curation strategies, but not only, but we will look at their impact not only on the cultural diversity, but also on the linguistic diversity. Such was the request or the roadmap put to us by our member states. So it becomes to be extremely complex, but that's not all. We have to cater and reflect on all those topics, discoverability in general, the impact on cultural and linguistic diversity for people in general, but also we have to include a reflection on what it means for people with disability and people with a lower income. So many angles, many dimensions to this study, which will be a complex study. When it comes to the definition of discoverability, well, that will be the very first step of the study. Certainly, the first speaker from the French ministry gave a definition which we find a lot in our research so far, preparing the terms of reference. We'll see whether this definition needs to be revised or whether it's okay, but it's basically being available online and searchable and findable even if you're not looking for it. So that's what we've heard. That's so far the hypothesis that we're taking. And we will look at that more in depth. And then we will look, the objective is to have an evidence-based diagnosis for all the different sectors, then take stock of what has happened, projects, experiments that have taken place and what they've brought, recommendations coming from the sector, coming from studies, and then identify options for action at the European level. And there we'll see what are the proposals. But certainly it will be a complex study that we are very happy to undertake because it's essential. But we know the roads will not be an easy one, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue with you. It's not something we want to do, behind closed door. It makes no sense. We absolutely need to be in touch with the sector in all its facets and with the actors. So before I finish, I just want to present my team briefly. The colleague in charge of this study is Maria Iglesias, and maybe you can wave. So everyone can approach you. And Maria is also a copyright lawyer expert. So there, I think she has all what we need to conduct this study. And then we also have Susanne Holman, who is the deputy head of unit. And Susanne, as you know, is in charge of the Music Moves Europe initiative. So she will be also contributing a lot to this study. With that, I'm finished. I just want to wave this because I'm sitting next to it and it's just tempting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Just going to do a short exchange with our panel before I open it to the floor. And I would like to just pick up on where you finished, which is the definition, and ask our panelists in no particular order. You've heard the definition right at the beginning from Romain and further to what Catherine said. it's critical, it's important. You've got opportunities, of course, after this meeting to follow up and help possibly enlarge on that definition. Is there anything, while we have Catherine and all her team here, that you would like to add on the definition? Or maybe you think something is... please.
Not really on the definition question, but I think what we should always keep in mind is this remuneration question. Because we often see that there, in the public discussion, there seems to be a kind of a competition between a competition for attention and a competition for the between the repertoires, and that I mean, when we are talking about cultural institutions who are organizing the diversity, who are organizing our rich cultural European life, we are mainly talking about publicly funded entities, and they do actually need a sound funding to keep up this plan of diversity. It is not that diversity comes along just through the air. We do need a funding of the institutions, and only if we have a funding of the institutions, we can focus on the content of the cultural different sectors, and not only on business models and on marketing issues and on financial success.
Yeah, please, Heidi.
Thanks, and I would just directly second this as well, and point also to the fact it's not just a free market or like the way we work, and I think also what's one of the key specialties of why European culture is so rich is that we have a very strong public system. And the public system is not per se the commercial system where the market drives the product. And this needs to be considered in continuing also to produce highly quality artistic ways of expressing ourselves, and considering also the values and principles that we feel are really important to put forward. Considering languages, considering minorities, because it's been, I think, eye-opening what you've shown, Detlef, the big leading cultures, languages, we know them, and whereas the rest we can't find them.
I think by now, at least from our perspective, we have quite solid knowledge of the workings of the algorithms in search engines and in discoverability and in searchability. The biggest problem we are still facing is serendipity. So where do you get new ideas, new content, new visions? Where can you find something new? Where can you find something you never suspected it being there? And that's the most problematic point. And even in that respect, I'd say from the experiments we made in the last 2 years concerning artificial intelligence, we are still operating by artificial intelligence more in the bubble, and the new suggestions we create by now are following the lines of the things people have been reading before. We see the big challenge how to get out of this and to bring something to light that nobody is suspecting when he is moving online. What we are all confronted with is limited attention of our readers, viewers, listeners, and that given that we have still a rapid technological change will be the biggest task for us to maintain people's interests in our cultural works and generate income from it.
Thank you, Netlef. Just moving on to another question that relates to what you've all said today, and that's a citizens' issue, the viewers, the listeners, spectators. What are the roles, do you think, for both education at quite a young, still in educational institutions, but also social networks? I think both in inspiring curiosity and explaining what we're discussing today, the whole idea of discoverability. How important is this again? In any order, please.
Well, it's very crucial, obviously. It's about educating the next generation. It's about training our future citizens to be competent enough to take all the variety of choices and be critical in their choice also, and to be trained to understand. And I think that's also now really for us the question when exploring, experimenting in our field with the options, to be aware where are limits, but also to take on the audiences with what we do already in exploring what are the various forms we, for example, devise now. There's digitally produced theatre, there's digitally mediated theatre, there's digitally distributed and located theatre. So there are all ways of understanding, again, also what does it mean? It's not just all the same, but to be more critical also about what I'm consuming and where I spend my time with.
Thank you. Another question, because I've been thinking what are going to be the important things. You've all mentioned as well the skills of cultural professionals around metadata. Is this something where the European institutions can play a role in facilitating skills workshops? How is this to be done? Because it may be just then the most able or the most well-funded are going to be able to do this. If you had an idea, or how would we be improving cultural professionals' skills as regards perhaps metadata? Again, any of you, please come in.
We now have, from the last 10 years, a very clear perspective of the skills and needs a metadata manager has to have. But I think, once again, by using new methods, that will also change again. And if you look at the big scientific publishers by now, like Springer or Elsevier, they don't do any human metadata management any longer. They just use machine intelligence to create new keywords. We were maybe 4 weeks right into the corona crisis, and before you didn't have any books on corona, and 4 weeks later you had hundreds of thousands of documents and books where there were to some extent a connection with corona or with the sociological after effects of the crisis. So the metadata manager, if they were still human, adapted very, very fast and created new keywords, made new content searchable and findable in 6 to 8 weeks, and the big scientific publishers just did it by data mining.
Very, very interesting. Oh, sorry, please.
Well, actually, for the visual sector, we're seeing kind of 2 ways to metadata. And the one way is that the picture agency for photography, those who are marketing seriously and reliable images, they, at a quite early stage, started to develop common metadata standards, whereas in the cultural environment, these common metadata standards are completely lacking. And the problem is that I think it is very good in the area of libraries. Sorry,
no,
because libraries, they do have a metadata fixed and agreed international metadata standard for more than 100 years, and that's absolutely lacking in other areas. It is, and from the museum side, all we know is that a huge problem with starting to digitize and make available the collections is that there is a lack of an internationally, even a nationally agreed metadata standard. And I think it's just a question of funding knowledge within the institutions, because they just can't generate this knowledge out of everyday's life. They would actually need to have a coordinated support from outside, and coordinated support from outside, of course, means funding too.
Please.
Yes, just one thing, because I found it striking what the French speaker said. Normally, when introducing the new marketing strategies, to use 20% of your time to create and 80% of your time to distribute. I think our current reality is the other way around. So this means there must be a total new, again, business model for the public institutions or performing arts theatre. It's a very crafts-driven work as well. So it must introduce new skills, new professions. We had the same thing also when we introduced now sustainability managers. There's a whole range of new skills needed to face our new reality. Yeah?
And how might one take that forward at a European level? What do you think we're looking at? Are we looking at just an idea, having, as it were, meetings of discoverability experts to discuss or to share best practice? How?
Yes, I think it's really how this usually works, to have peer groups, to have exchange, coordinated exchange amongst the member states, to have informative sessions about this together with the sector. Like this forum here is very useful to initiate also amongst us exchanges. We can learn from the book sectors. We are also publishing in our parts, or the copyrights issues, obviously. What kind of agencies work? What are the fiscal implications here? But still, the education parts are very crucial. So to shift and create new professions, I think that's, and to have this as part of the educational system integrated.
Thank you.
I actually think what Europe could do is to start workshops to just create knowledge. I'm extremely skeptical about this European data space for culture, because this is a topic that is, the idea comes from the top and it should drip down rather than that the sectors start to organize themselves. So I think what we would need is a kind of it's not a grassroots approach, because it's not grassroots institutions who are working on that. But we have to start where the knowledge is and develop from there, rather than saying we want to achieve this and then we give tenders and certain institutions apply for funding. That's difficult actually to achieve. I think we have to start where the knowledge is, where the people are working with the works, and from there on start with workshops and then expand the knowledge throughout the sectors and throughout the whole community.
Detlef, before, and then I will bring it to you.
Yeah, we started the work on metadata groups more than 10 years ago, and especially we were driven by our British colleagues. We have a common language we speak with each other, as Anke just said. For libraries, it's Mark 21, and for booksellers, it's Onyx as the metadata exchange language. And by defining the exchange language, we also have the project how to define all the rules of the metadata language and how to use it. And we had lots of best practice papers. They work more or less well. And what we also learned from 2017 on, and especially in the times of Corona, we have very lively online exchange almost once a month in the working groups we have. And we want to get that on the next level and have more exchange with our European partners in the other countries. And I think we should also maintain our European interests against, in that case, I have to say something sad, against our British colleagues who have the standards, but they left the EU by now. So from time to time, we have difficulties to make ourselves heard.
Thank you very much, Detlef. You can imagine how sad I am. Romain, can we bring Romain in from Paris?
I hope so. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add maybe one little thing, because the discussion was really interesting, but I feel that it's been oriented on mainly technical or regulatory aspects, even education, which is kind of a top-down or professionally oriented approach. I would like to add that we also need to look at from the public side, from the viewer side, and what I find important, maybe and could only be achieved on a European scale, is to understand usage evolution. Because what is striking in my position is that there's actually a lot of data on the various. I mean, any institution knows its own public. The platforms, they know, they have a lot of data on their users, but we lack a common organization to analyze it and to objective, to exploit it and to objectify what is going on. I'm saying this because from the discussion that I have had in the last couple of years, the subject of what's going on in terms of online cultural practices, I find it generates extremely strong opinions, very dogmatic. There's one side that's telling us that digital technology, digital experience is very solitary, it locks in, that we don't feel anything in front of a digitalized painting, which is true. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have another side that's telling us that at least the public cultural institutions are too elitist, and that only with digital technology can we overcome this to achieve a culture for everyone. And I find that there are actually not a lot of survey or institutions that are able to take a look back and aggregate usage data to objectify what is going on.
Thank you, Romain. I hope I can see scribbling going on, particularly from Catherine. I think all our invaluable points from the panel are being noted and will be taken forward. I'd like to now just switch to all of you and see if we have any questions in the small... Yes, Anne, please.
Yes, thank you. Anne Bergman-Taron. I'm the director of Federation of European Publishers. First and foremost, I want to wish good luck to Catherine because, for example, you can listen to a song or watch an image without having translation. You can enjoy it. People enjoyed Ukrainian music while they had no clue. If you have a Ukrainian book in front of you, you'll stare at it and that's it. So there's also all of that complexity that some works can, or theater, you have to understand what's being said on stage. So good luck. And I just wanted to take the chance of this audience to say and to answer Anke to a certain extent. We have been working at W3C on a protocol to allow a machine-readable scheme for text and data mining. So there's a internationally agreed protocol that you can attach to a work. Now, I don't know to which extent the museums that you were mentioning we'll be happy to do that. That's a different matter, but there has been an international agreed protocol, which is at W3C, and I would recommend that everyone has a look at it, because text and data mining, that was really something for our industry, and we were very concerned when the digital single market directive was being discussed, but basically it's a matter for everyone. So W3C protocol on right reservation, and if you need information, you can ask us.
Anybody else like to make a small contribution? Or yes, please. And could you introduce yourselves? Yeah.
Thank you very much. I would like to start by a French word, bonjour, to all of you. I'm Isidora Niang. I'm ambassador, representative of International Organization for Francophonie here in Brussels. And I would like to thank you, Mrs. Moderator, and all the panelists, also Mr. Romain from France. One point to start. It's a shame that we couldn't enjoy the convenience of linguistic diversity through interpreters, but nevertheless, I will do my comment in English, and bear with me, I'm supposed to be speaking in French. Second point, I would like to share with you the commitment of International Organization for Francophonie in promoting a fairer, more responsible, and more inclusive digital cultural environment. Actions are ongoing both at the political and operational level, and I would like to join the point that Ms. Anke Schirals just shared before you start opening the floor. We need to avoid this approach top to bottom. It's crucial to give the floor to the cultural actors, because they're the ones that should be doing the groundwork, and then the institution should come and help out. So we're much interested in seeing what the European Union is going to be having as progress through this work. But as Ms. Anke just said, we need to expand the knowledge throughout all sectors. And for Francophonie, we are focusing on 5 sectors. Usually it's cinema, audiovisual, music, publishing, and performing arts. And we're going, for instance, to festivals throughout Africa, the Massa in Abidjan, talking to cultural actors and sharing with them what we could do to help them through digital improvement, to access to metadata, to all that is available for them to benefit. And discoverability is the key. So this is for us today a starting point, and hopefully we can work more and intensively with all the partners that are sharing this topic, this important topic that you were talking about today. I would like to thank you all.
Merci beaucoup pour votre contribution, et je crois que la prochaine panel sera aussi en français. Excusons-nous de les contraintes, parce que bien sûr, on aurait beaucoup aimé d'avoir plusieurs langues. Hein. Mais merci beaucoup pour votre contribution.
Merci à vous.
I'm looking for any more hands. If there are no more comments, because we are having a reception. Excuse me, Catherine, please.
Yeah, no, I just wanted, I have a question for our wonderful panel. So do I understand right that all sectors individually, recognize discoverability as a key issue, yet I understand that there are no cross-sectors exchanges on this topic? So so is there a need to facilitate that at European level, or can that come from, because we've heard that, bottom-up is so much, is the way to go, but is there a need for action there at European level?
I think so, definitely. I think it can only help accelerate knowledge transfer, instead of us trying to find now everyone who might have, I'm really amazed by all your knowledge around here and the expertise, like finding the experts, putting bringing us in contact and seeing this really also from a European point of view, because that's, I think, the most crucial question. And for us, it's really also like taking the steps. And then the pandemic, I think, has shown it. We just go the fast way now in this whole topic, and artificial intelligence will do the rest. So we need to control also. I think that's key on the development.
Thank you very much for that question. And I think we, of course, are wanting to see how best we can take this as a beginning, and this cross-sectoral approach and talking with each other and coming together can continue in the future. I'm sorry to move on, but we've only got limited time. I'd like to say a very big thank you to our panel. So happy that you could be with us, and look forward to seeing you all again on a regular basis. And we're now going to take a short break before the next panel. Thank you. I should say if we could reconvene about 25 past, yeah? Thank you.
faut appuyer dessus, sinon les autres... Si, regardez.
Si vous voulez vous asseoir.
Could you please take your seats? We're going to start in French so that the French-speaking people are happy. So I'd like to invite you to use your headphones for those who do not have a good knowledge of the very beautiful language that is French. So I can see who's not speaking French here in the room. So I'd like to thank you for being with us today in order to listen to this second debate. And we're going to discuss regulations. We're going to see whether they are necessary, whether they are possible in order to improve the discoverability of the works. And I'd like to thank our friends from Quebec. Why? Well, because in order to defend culture, we needed them to help us with two concepts. One that is that helped us giving a name to our coalition, that is cultural diversity. It was their invention. And the second concept is this concept of discoverability, a bit difficult to pronounce, but it is thanks to the people from Quebec that this concept was invented. And it translates the will to to identify works in a difficult environment as compared to the linear environment, i.e. the non-linear environment. And I'm very happy to have this debate, and I'm going to tell you who is with us today. First, we have Mr. Burak Özgen, who's the General Counsel of GESAC, that is the European grouping of authors and composers organization, that is music. I'm also from the ECCD, but from the dramatic side of the music. It's a bit different. Then Olivia Régnier, who's the Senior Director of European Policy at Spotify, and I'd like to thank her very specially to be with us, because when there is a debate on culture, the bosses of platforms, usually, they are very reluctant to come. I don't know why, but she's here, and I think it's very positive to have her with her. Then Mr. Ibán GARCÍA del Blanco, who's from the SD, from Spain. Then the representative of the European Commission, Marta San Agustin Riachuelo, who's the head of sector of DG Connect. Also the unit AVMS. And I'd like to thank the Commission, and I mentioned this already earlier on because I spent years fighting against the European Commission because my reproach was that market was more considered as being more important as culture. And during the presidency of Mr. Juncker, there were two important directives on the copyright and on on-demand services, and this strengthened the protection of cultural creation in Europe. So it showed that the creation was then more important than the free market. And then we have Karim Ibourki, who is the president of CSA in Belgium. And he's also the former president of an important organization that is ERGA. It is an organization of audiovisual regulators at European level. It is an organization that has worked a lot under the presidency of Karim and under the presidency of Mr. Schramek as well on the directive on video on demand. And in order to start this debate, we're going to talk about what I'm less familiar with, and it's only logical, i.e. music. Because what strikes me is that in the audiovisual sector, we can complain, we can criticize, but there is a very strong regulation, obligations of investments, quota for the distribution, for the presence on the platforms as well. But for music, it's not as strong. So I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Burak Özgen and to Mrs. Olivia Renier, and they're going to tell us about their cordial agreement and about everything you will do in the future in order to improve the discoverability of musical works, because you are obliged to work together, right? So I give you the floor right now.
Thank you very much for this invitation, both to the Coalition and the CCFG. My name is Burak Özgen. I just want to say I will speak today on the discoverability of European works in the music sector, but GESAC represents outer societies from all artistic fields, including also audiovisual and visual arts. I will go directly into the subject. So as you said, it's a widely accepted principle, the discoverability is in the audiovisual sector with the legislation and everything. So in the music sector, we have examples at the national level for instance, radio in France or in other countries. And then we are seeing actually now, even in Belgium, French-speaking parties considering extension of the AVMST provisions to music streaming services. We have examples in third countries. Canada was mentioned this morning. There's Australia and New Zealand as well. And recent studies also show that music streaming is a relevant issue for policy and need for action at EU level. So why we need a further work at EU level on discoverability in music? So first of all, music streaming is the main music usage today. So when you look at the numbers, overall music streaming is 68% of all music engagement, 78% of consumers use music digital service providers, more than 600 million subscribers for free and paid pure music streaming services. When you consider the UGC-based platforms like YouTube and the others, it goes up to 2 billion people. So the time spent on audio-based streamers and UGC platforms is always increasing and taking more time of the people on their daily life. And the studies at European level again show that being in a popular list in a streaming service tangibly affects the visibility and the actual number of streams generated by an artist. So it has direct impact on its discoverability. Yet, so far, the music streaming services are operating in a legal vacuum, as you said, that is very weak, and all the European legislation so far on platform to platform or DSA or AI Act or the Media Freedom Act or AVMST, none of them really addressed this sector, and it was all about the other services, although all those issues were in a way relevant. So What are the main issues that we are interested in when discussing on the discoverability in the music streaming is, first of all, the need for more diversity and discoverability within the abundance of the content. So when we look at the numbers again, as just like we actually commissioned a new study, which was published at the end of the last year, and when we look at the other studies as well, we show that there are more than 100 million tracks available on those services, and more than 2 million artists' works are there. But according to 2020 numbers of Spotify, 93% of the artists have fewer than 1,000 monthly listeners. When you look at the numbers again from the recent inquiries, the top 1% of the tracks account for between 75 to 80% of all streams, and the top 10 for between 95 to 97% of the streams. And according to the existing recent studies at EU level as well, while the share of the national content is strong, is strong in big member states with strong cultural policies and with some measures at national level, like in France or Italy, going up to 50%. The EU average is actually 19% for the local content, 15% for EU, 18% for UK, and 42% for the US content. So as we saw in the Canadian, Australian, and the New Zealand examples are, the reason to work on the music streaming market is to protect the local culture against the dominance of the US and UK works. And then it puts the relevance of this issue here as well. So the other issue, very, very important, is the stream manipulation. It happens mainly in 4 ways. One of them is the very widespread stream fraud by the third parties, not by the services themselves, by the third parties. There is a report from the National Music Center of France recently published showing the volume of these practices. We can put a lot of things, but it really takes away already very low revenues from the artists, and then filling the pockets of the fraudulent people through such practices, because they're buying, for instance, through fake accounts or through stolen cards or through family accounts, multi-user accounts, 10,000 subscriptions, playing the same 31 seconds sound that they register that is not music, and then playing in streaming farms elsewhere in the world, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, non-stop, in order to generate money from those services, which would be in the end more than what they spend. And it's a fraudulent practice that needs to be stopped. And the other issue is the phenomenon of fake artists. We are seeing more and more articles every day on that, and inclusion of low-cost music in the popular playlist by the services. So this is actually an issue that there are services, so-called royalty-free music, where they are buying all the rest of the creators and then selling them for very cheap services. And then we've witnessed the trend that in some popular playlists, the services are placing such content more and more in order to pay less to right holders and then gain on the payment that they make towards the right holders. The other issue is the payola scheme, which is called discovery mode by the services. And this is, and actually there was yesterday a statement on that as well, to extend this practice, which is actually asking the creators to accept even less revenues than they are getting right now, which is not sufficient, in exchange of more visibility. So when you provide such a scheme to everyone, what you get is only less royalties, because you cannot provide more visibility to all artists. So, and this kind of pay for visibility schemes are not good for our sector, and then we think that they need to be dealt with. And the other one is the inclusion of content or content of certain artists, again, pay for view, or the things that there is, for instance, currently a criminal investigation in Norway against one of the music services that were owned by the 2 big pop artists, and then it's been found that they were promoting their new releases in the playlist and recommendation systems in order to gain more revenues. So what do we need? we need two things as a further action and a more concrete look at the European level. First of all is the transparency of algorithms and recommendation systems for all music streaming services, and actually for all streaming services, so that the services can be accountable both towards the public, the listeners, and to the creators, so everybody are more confident about what's going on and understand better what's going on. And if there is any choices made only for commercial profit or at the expense of some groups, that you can understand and do something about that. And the second point is positive obligations on diversity on offer and the discoverability of European works. Algorithms are an essential part of the streaming experience for consumers. You need to use them, and naturally use of algorithms is introducing a subjectivity according to the choices of the people. But we are seeing bad practices that also includes other things only for the benefit of certain players or certain services. So why not to consider therefore also some positive obligations in the way to use these algorithms to ensure more diversity and also, where possible, the discoverability of European works. So these two issues have already been addressed in 5 different parliamentary reports over the last 2 years. And they are asking all to the Commission to look at it further, and then even with a look to extend the principles like in the AVMSD or in any other way for the diversity and discoverability to music services. So, and actually last week, the opinion adopted by the incl committee on the AVMSD also asked this point. So there is relevance now. There is a time now. There is a study on discoverability at the Commission. It is in the work program of the Council. So I think it's the right time to look at this issue more seriously and then to see what can be done at EU level on this. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Well, thank you so much. It's very interesting because we can see that you still have a lot to do, a lot of progress. And the European legislator, the Parliament, the Commission will have to deal very seriously with music. And what was done for the audiovisual sector should be done as well in the field of music in order to improve discoverability. But I'm sure that Olivia Régnier is going to suggest solutions, clever solutions. I'm quite sure of this. So I'm going to give her the floor. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me to take part in this hearing. Indeed, I'm not sure that I'm going to suggest solutions, but I'm here to give you information accompanied by figures, because I think that we have to make the difference between what people perceive and what's the reality based on figures. So first and foremost, a few words about Spotify. So you probably know Spotify already, but a part of my presentation will be in French and the second part will be in English, so it's diversified. So Spotify is a Swedish platform that was created more than 15 years ago. The service is a combination of free and premium services. And the important part of this is that it is essential to convince some users to use the service to be in competition with other services that have the same business model or that use piracy, and that we are able to show that we, well, in fact, 2/3 of our paying subscribers started as free users. So one is leading to the other. And we have more and more users, and I think that we are lucky because we have a European service that is a leader on the market with more than 500 million, million users in over 180 countries, a very high number of tracks available, and also a very high number of artists as well. And I'd like to mention that there are many artists on Spotify. Now, there is a difference between artists who are active as professionals or quasi-professionals, and those who have just put 1 song or 10 songs. We're not talking about the same kind of reality. There are 5 million artists that have less than 10 songs on Spotify. So it gives you an idea of the difference between professional artists and many other artists that can put their music on Spotify.
C'est que quelles sont les raisons pour lesquelles le streaming musical est aussi populaire? Il y en a 3 principales. D'abord, parce qu'il fournit un catalogue
There are 3 main reasons for which music streaming is so successful, because it provides a full catalog. It gives flexibility to the users. The users may choose what they listen to, and they may organize also the way they listen to music. They have a lot of leeway, a lot of freedom. And in addition, these services, while proposing a huge catalog, constantly give our users the opportunity to discover new music. And our users consider that as a very important element of the attractivity of Spotify.
So what I would like to do on this presentation is actually provide some explanations and also respond to a number of misconceptions, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about fraud, about concentration of users, about the lack of diversity and discoverability. So the first point I want to mention is that streaming has returned the music market, the whole music market, to growth and to success. Second, actually more and more artists are connecting with their audience, are finding the audience, and we'll explain how and why. And that's much more than the CD era and that on radio, for example. Third, something which is a big difference probably with audiovisual, is that European repertoire and local repertoire are incredibly popular on Spotify. I actually disagree with the figures mentioned by Jezak. I don't know where they come from, but our figures show that local artists drive a majority of streams on services. They are incredibly popular, and recommendations enhance that. And finally, is that our users are actually getting, the more engaged they are, the more genres, the more artists they discover, so there is enormous discoverability on our services. So first, a couple of figures about the market. The music market has grown steadily in the last 10 years, thanks to streaming, to music streaming. And in the last year, it has gone, let's say, on a steady 2-digit growth. So in average, 10% growth every year across the world. The online revenues from author CMOs have grown as well. What I want to stress is that, and that's maybe not always known, is that the streaming services are not profitable. Spotify, as large as it may be and as successful and known as it may be, is not a profitable service. We pay 70% of our revenues to all creators. The rest is the gross margin to invest, of course, with a fixed cost. They are huge investments to develop the service, continuing to make it relevant, facing competition, bringing new features. Spotify is not yet profitable. It's not a problem in itself, but it is something that needs to be known. Streaming, is true, is now a main driver of music consumption, and as I said, the payouts to the industry have increased. What is important is that it's true, the music sector in Europe and across the world has never relied on subsidies. It has not relied on quotas, apart from sporadic, national initiatives, but they are sporadic. It's a sector that has managed to be very successful in Europe. European content has always been successful without that. And I want to underline that, because if there had been a problem, well, neither not physical, but radios have never been subject to quotas, for example, except in some countries. Now, local repertoire, coming to this, is incredibly popular. Our users want to listen to their local repertoire. And I'm giving you a couple of quite impressive data. Across Europe, we've been through a number of countries, and not just the very large countries, some smaller ones like Finland, Romania, Czech Republic. The top 20 most streamed artists, I'm not speaking of the top 20 tracks, it's the most streamed artists are in Italy, 100% European and actually mainly local. Poland, 100% European, mainly local. France, other countries, you can continue the list. There's an enormous popularity and enormous amount of streaming from local artists. So I don't know where the low figures from JZAC come from. I don't know if they say share of, I don't know share of what, but our figures show that there's huge popularity of local repertoire. That's reflected also by the recommendations on our services because they take into account users' preference and therefore, that's reflected in algorithmic, but also editorial recommendations with local playlists and emphasis on local content or European content in general. I'll say a quick word about fraud because it's been mentioned that there seems to be huge streaming fraud on services. The CNM study in France has been mentioned. I'd like to quote one thing which hasn't been mentioned. The actual fraudulent streams are between 1 and 1.4% of the overall stream. It is very small. And not only is it small, but it's controlled in the sense that the services are recognizing those trends. We have a very sophisticated team to catch streaming fraud, to use AI to identify patterns of fraud and actually detect fraud when it happens and automatically exclude it from the payment of royalties. So in our view, Spotify's view, fraud is not having an impact on payment of royalty and is not as close as to being as high as sometimes presented as a massive problem. So next point I would like to mention as well is that more and more artists actually finding success thanks to streaming. It's true that you have, as I mentioned, a lot of artists on Spotify, but not all artists have the same catalog, have the same activity, have the same sort of exposure. There are millions of artists on Spotify, as I mentioned, millions of them put between 1 and 10 songs. We've identified that you have around 200,000 professional or aspiring professional artists on Spotify. What is that? It's artists who have put at least 10 songs on Spotify. It's artists who have at least a certain amount of followers. So you can therefore make a difference between those who are active, a certain following, and make a living out of it, or can aspire to make a living out of it, and others who put 1 or 2 songs on Spotify, because actually it's getting easier and easier to upload songs on Spotify via aggregators. For example, we have now 1 in 4 artists self-distribute. What does it mean? They don't rely on a record label. They find an aggregator, put their music on Spotify. Yes, not everyone is going to have exposure having the same activity. Now, this said, we have an increasing amount of artists who are very, very much stream and who are public and who are very successful. I'll give one comparison because it's important to say that it is an increasing number of artists. We have 57,000 artists who make the majority of streams. It's a lot. This said, if you compare to 5 years ago, and that's the first graph, 5 years ago you had 16,000 artists making that majority of streams. Now you have 57 artists. And this is growing every year. What does it mean? It means that the top of the streams and the revenues are shared between more and more artists every year. So it's spread amongst more artists. Take a comparison with the CD era, where the shops had, at best, let's say, a couple of thousand artists in stock. In the CD, at the peak of the CD era, the top 50 albums were a quarter of the sales. Well, actually, in streaming, the top 50 are only 12% of the sales. So again, success is shared amongst more and more artists on streaming and in comparison to before. I also wanted to mention that streaming, and Spotify in particular, pays attention not only to artists, performers, but also composers. So we have the possibility, we provide credit information for authors, we create written by playlists where you can search for a particular artist. Next one is that streaming promotes discovery. How do we do that? First, studies, and we have different studies examining users' behavior, show that the streaming users are more and more engaged in the service. They listen to more music and they pay more revenues to music than in the physical world, for example, or in other sources of music. They're more engaged. They report that they listen to many more different genres than elsewhere. They report that they're more likely to discover new genres, new music on streaming services. That is due to the fact that they have unlimited catalogs, so they have a lot of choice. It's also the fact that they're searching a lot, they're getting more and more curious, they're listening, they discover new things, and they get recommendations that encourage them to explore or to listen to new genres or to music. So in terms of recommendation, a few words about the recommendations that are actually very popular on streaming services or make them popular. On Spotify, you have different types of recommendations. You have personalized recommendations that are algorithmic, based on the user's preferences expressed by their playlists, expressed by the likes, expressed by the skips and other things. You have algorithmic playlists that are really run by algorithm, also based on users' profile. And you have editorial playlists where you have editors trying things, sharing, information with other countries. You should try this song, put it on that playlist. So you have different ways to create recommendations. By the way, you have a lot of information about this on Spotify Made to Be Found website. This website has been created for artists, for them to understand how their music is recommended or found, and also to help them be more active, or how can they reach their fan, which tools they can use. Another thing is that Spotify for Artists provides a lot of data and tools to artists to develop their fan base. They receive data which is indeed individualized to artists about where they are popular, in which songs are popular, in which circumstances they are popular, and that helps them, for example, to decide that if they find out that a song or the album is very, very popular in a particular country, to tour there or to do more merchandising there. So all this data help the artists shape their career, and we have a lot of artists telling us, I love Spotify for Artists. I get so much information as to how to develop my career and my production. Now, you have a number of recommendations indeed. What I want to stress as well is that actually 50%, more than 50% of the streams are entirely user-led. So more than half of the streams on Spotify are determined by the users' research, choice, created playlist, or maybe by friends' playlists, etc. So we don't want to overstate either the importance of playlists and recommendations. They play a role in discovery, that's very useful, but user-driven search and streams are very important as well. So I come to a couple of conclusions. I think what I would like to say is the question is not how and why you need to regulate streaming. I think we need to check first, is there a problem? Can we quantify the data? Do we have clear examples? And the question is actually, do you need to regulate music streaming? Is there a problem to solve? Is there a quantified problem to solve? And would regulation actually help and change anything? I think what I want to stress, as I mentioned before, music streaming is different from audiovisual. The music sector is doing very, very well in Europe. The European music is doing extremely well. Local repertoire is doing extremely well. There's no problem of exposure or popularity of European content. Streaming creates more diversity, more discovery than any other sources of music. And I think mandating streaming, mandating discovery or mandating rules on how to discover would go first against probably the user's freedom to choose what they want to listen to and to have something which is personalized to them. And another thing we shouldn't forget is that streaming services all have the same catalog, or at least all the large ones, and they all have the comprehensive global catalog. So what do we compete on? We compete on the attractiveness of the layout and the features, and we compete on how good we are to provide content that responds to the need of our users and that is relevant for them. So when you start imposing quotas or obligations, you standardize services, you push them into doing certain things that actually standardize them and harmonize them. So you're losing the edge, and in a way, you're probably losing the relevance for users because we are on demand, because we have exhaustive catalog, and because we provide discovery. So I will conclude by saying that if discovery is about helping more artists and authors to be found and to connect with their audience, this is exactly what music streaming is already doing. Thank you.
Merci. Alors, je suis vraiment heureux d'animer un débat où les deux premiers intervenants.
I'm very happy to facilitate a debate in which the first two speakers agree on everything. It's wonderful. I have to acknowledge something about music, and you're right to say that there are huge differences with the audiovisual sector. One of the main differences is that you're a European platform, while the main audiovisual platforms are American platforms. So it's not exactly the same. But you could continue this debate. It's very interesting. The way in which Spotify positions itself is about the same way as when we discussed Netflix, Amazon, when they said no rules, we don't want any obligation, we don't want any rule, it's about the same position. So I'm now going to give the floor to the representative of the European Commission, Marta San Agustin Riazuelo, who's going to tell us about the initiatives of DG Connect. And she will tell us whether in this debate about music, but which is a debate that we could have about the audiovisual sector, because the issues of discoverability are dealt with a little bit in the SMA directive, but it's not really operational, not really in an operational way. But do you have initiatives underway or in the pipeline? What do you intend to do? Have you spotted problems in the music sector, in the audiovisual sector? Knowing that, in relation with the audiovisual sector, which I know best because I don't know music so much, the American platforms have enabled us to discover works that were absent from from our mainstream audiovisual systems. In the different countries, the programming was cut in two parts: the national works, foreign works, and it is thanks to certain audiovisual platforms that we were able to discover European works from Scandinavian countries, Israeli works, because they produce many good movies there, Mexican works, Korean films, so a lot of audiovisual production, very interesting, that found it difficult to find its way in the programming of the different countries. So what are the intentions of the Commission in that field in the forthcoming months? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. Good afternoon to everybody. And just to continue with the debate, I think that the music market and the audiovisual market are very different. And the legislative frameworks should also be different, are different. I would like to focus now on the audiovisual sector in discoverability. And in order to continue the debate, Pascal, I would not entirely agree to say that in the framework of the audiovisual sector, there isn't so much movement. I'm going to start with the legislative framework, the SMA directive, and I'll move on to English.
Make it discoverable. And the first slight different or a bit specificity on the audiovisual sector is that we talk, at least from the regulatory point of view, we talk about prominence and not about discoverability. So it is true that these are two concepts that are interrelated, but they have a slightly different meaning. So discoverability and findability relate more to the likelihood of discovery and to the related consumption of content, while prominence, as we understand it, is more related to the location of the content and to how to make them more, or how they are more or less visible to the final users. So this is why we talk about prominence in the directive and how to promote the prominence of European works. So jumping to the European legal framework and to what we have to promote European works and to make them more prominent. First of all, we have a specific provision on European works, but we also have a provision that concerns the prominence of audiovisual media services of general interest. This is what I call a may clause, so it is not an obligation, but member states can introduce measures to promote those services. But I will not talk about them today. I will talk about Article 13, which is the article that introduced in the revision in 2018 an obligation for video service video-on-demand service providers to have at least a 30% quota on their catalogs, and together with that also an obligation to ensure the prominence of those works. So those obligations go together, hand in hand, and why? Because in the proposal and then of course the co-legislators decided that the introduction of quotas is not sufficient to promote European works, and it is also necessary that users can easily find them. And we thought that the best tool to promote them is the introduction of this obligation. So that was the rationale behind. So as I mentioned, there is this obligation to ensure the prominence of European works. The definition does not provide it does not provide a definition on prominence, but we have a recital, which is recital 35, that to me provides a quite precise explanation of what is understood or what is to be understood by prominence, because it indicates that it involves promoting works through facilitating access to such works. And then this recital provides some examples as to the tools that can be used to promote such works. For instance, a dedicated section in the service homepage, the possibility to research for European works, the use of European works in campaigns or that they are promoted in particular, for example, using banners or similar tools. So here there are two conclusions. The first is that there is quite a wide margin of maneuver for member states to decide how they want to go with this obligation, and that this list is a list of examples. It's not a closed list, that therefore it is possible to use other means or it is possible to use more means. So now you will wonder then what has happened and how member states have implemented this obligation. But don't worry, Karin, because I don't want to preempt your intervention, but I am pretty sure that you will give a detailed overview of what has been done and how ERGA has been working on this, because this is such a broad term and this is so open that I think that there's been a considerable exchange between the audiovisual regulators in the European Union done by ERGA and exchange of practices. And this has been very important. It has been a great job, and I'm pretty sure that Karin will explain more on what ERGA has been doing. But overall, there is quite a variety among member states and how they've been doing this. But in general, it goes from very general provisions to in some cases, quite detailed ones. Most of the member states have not introduced a definition of prominence neither. And also most of member states have left a margin of maneuver to do this, to ensure the prominence. So they have used this margin and things remain quite wide. For the moment, I cannot give you more precise information because there is an ongoing study on the European works provisions as we speak that we have commissioned, that is still ongoing. That is part of what the directive prescribes that needs to be done. So there will be this independent study, and there is also a report that each member state has to send to the Commission to inform how they have implemented the articles concerning European works. And based on those two elements, the Commission will prepare and publish a report on European works. And there we will have, and in the study, we will have much more precise information about how this implementation has been done by member states and more detailed and more granular information. So maybe you will invite me to the next event and I can then present you in more detail the report and the study. So I will leave it here for the moment. Thank you very much.
soyez sûr que pour nos présents.
Well, rest assured, if you want to present us the forthcoming measures in order to strengthen the audiovisual sector in the future, we will invite you. There is no doubt whatsoever. I didn't say, in fact, that the directive is not efficient. The directive did have important results. And I know it particularly because I'm coming from a country, France, that imposed to the platforms the strongest obligations because today we have 20% of the turnover that should refer to European works and 25% if there are recent movies that are presented and 5% also of financing for the national fund for the cinema sector. So, well, the audiovisual sector of France can teach a lot. But anyway, I think that the directive indeed has led to very important measures. But concerning the topic, more specifically of discoverability that you call prominence, well, prominence is difficult to translate into French. But this concept of prominence is only at the very beginning. And it's a very complex issue. And maybe Karim will refer to the topic of algorithms. We don't know exactly how it works, but because of these algorithms, the homepage of the people connected is different according to the kind of thing they watch. If I watch only European works, my homepage is going to present only European works. And I will be led towards works of that kind. So it's very difficult to have a global view. And if you're interested, we will provide you with the studies that we've started carrying out with Joël Farchik, who's a universitarian, who's worked with a group in order to better understand this topic of algorithms. But now I'm going to give the floor to Karim Ibourki, because ERGA, that's the European regulator, is dealing with the audiovisual sector, and it's really the state of the art in terms of reflection. So he's going to tell us what's the current situation in terms of discoverability and prominence. I don't know what's the best word to be used. I prefer to use the word of Quebec or the word that we use in Brussels, but whatever. Well, thank you so much, Pascal. Thank you so much to the organizers of this afternoon session for inviting me. And I've seen that the debate was to be moderated by Pascal. I was a bit afraid to know how he was going to facilitate all this, but until now he's done a very good job. But there are many points here, in fact, that are only logical, but I think the debate has already progressed quite a lot. So much so that we can raise new questions, because Marta has presented what's in the directive. But what's the world today? What's the world in which we live? If I remember well, the directive dates back to November 2018. On the 15th of March, so in a few days, the last European countries will have transposed the directive, November 2018 until March 2023. So you see many years, so that in the end, all the European countries have transposed the directive. So with the distance we have concerning the implementation of the directive, we can say that there is a lot of variation. And it did not prevent us at the level of the regulators to discuss this topic of prominence, of discoverability, and to do so very seriously. Because for us, of course, it's one of the results of a long cultural fight that was carried out by many member states concerning the cultural exception. In fact, it is the result of this idea according to which culture is not a commercial good, and if we want to defend that, we have to adopt measures to protect culture, and we have to enhance the cultural heritage. Now, when the member states transposed the different elements of the directive, what we saw is that, if you allow me to say so, it's the minimum requirement that was established in many states. Now, of course, there are countries that did much more. There are countries that did a little bit more than what was foreseen, but most of the countries, let's say, have done what was required of them. And then they are waiting and see how the market is going to be structured. And we also have to realize that when we talk about this topic of cultural exception, not everyone has the same approach of the need to impose obligations to the market. It's very easy if you are in a group where everyone defends culture, we are in agreement. And when we are sitting with the industry, with the member states, with the politicians, there we do not have the same vision. We do not have a common vision. But the directive is there. And I think that the directive for us regulators is something very positive. Now, concerning the way the member states, as I was saying, have transposed it, there are some differences. And concerning the effects, it's still very difficult to know very concretely what happened. Earlier on, it was said that policies should be based on concrete things, and I think it's true. And Olivier Régnier was saying we need figures. We need an analysis of the market to see if it worked. And Professor Farchi was mentioned. He already carried out a study, indeed. And it shows that there is indeed some diversity. And your presentation, you said that today in Europe, people watch movies that they would never have watched 5 or 6 years ago. It's a reality. Now, if the market is going to be structured in a way, and if the tools are going to give an answer to the political objectives of the directive, is another question. And I think that, well, we mentioned algorithms, intelligence, artificial intelligence, but we are only at the beginning of understanding this. Concerning the transparency of algorithms, fortunately, the Commission is also working on other legislative packages that's going to improve transparency, because we have to see the AVMS directive in conjunction with other directives or regulations. But very clearly for us, we will have to have more concrete information to see whether the tool indeed answers to the political objective for which it was established. So that's the rule of the game, the objective of the game. And very concretely, in terms of figures, what do we check? So we have tools that are left up to the discretion of the member states, a code of conduct, for instance. The CSA of Belgium, for instance, must work with the sector in order to prepare a code of conduct that's going to illustrate the best practice. So the best practice to promote cultural diversity. So we are currently working on this. We've started the work because in Belgium the transposition also took some time. It was transposed in April 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So the distance we have concerning the structuring effects on the market in terms of diversity and promotion of diversity, well, it is something that it is relatively low, and it should be recognized. And Marta referred to a study commissioned by the European Commission, and it's going to be an important element as well. And it should be said that there is, in a way, a common opinion, I think so, between the creators' world, the regulators, and the Commission, because from the very beginning, the Commission said that it was going to monitor the implementation of the rules of Article 13, considering that it was a very important article in this regulation. So I usually tend to see the full glass or instead of the empty glass, or half empty and half full. And now, of course, we always be able to identify systems that are in a way a justification related to legal requirements, so a minimum, as says the speaker, while some others are going to try to do more. And we see that in some countries there is nothing, no rules, nothing was established. And the powerful countries in cultural terms should be able to establish a stricter regulation as compared to other countries where there is no regulation above the legal requirements. So we'll have to see what happens with all that. But today, we cannot say that the platform economy has done something for European diversity. I think it would be a mistake. We have to see whether the trend is going to be confirmed, if it is sustainable in financial terms. That is what's at stake in the coming years. And we need figures. We have to see whether the political objective that was related to the directive is something that is achieved in terms of diversity. So the regulators are going to work on this. We have published a report that was mentioned already at the end of 2022 when I was president of ERGA. We published a report on prominence and diversity. We also have the objectives of our work plan now. We're not going to deal with this in the first half of the year. We'll do it during the second half because in the member states, the controls are done once the civil year is over, so we are always a bit late. But we're going to continue the work, and I think that there is a common will among the regulators to continue whatever happens. So to really focus on this and to go on measuring the positive effects or the effects that are not enough positive in relationship with the Article 13 of the directive. And with the topic of music, it is true that it has not been the biggest concern, not a strong concern, as strong in terms of regulation. But the markets are not exactly the same, indeed, in the current situation. And I think that there are some technical criteria that were highlighted by the lady that facilitate things for music. And they are more difficult to implement for the audiovisual sector, for instance. The flexibility of the interface, for instance, you referred to this earlier, is a major criteria for the efficiency of discoverability, because you can decide whatever kind of objectives. If the tool is not easy to be used, it's not going to work. So we can discuss about the use of those tools in order to make sure that things can be efficient. Maybe there are some best practices to be identified or guidelines that could be published by the European Commission that would go further as compared to the existing ones. And so I think we should work along these lines in the future. Well, thank you, Karim. I'd like to add that there is an important element that's not the result of the directive, but of the directive on the copyright, i.e. the obligation to communicate the number of views, because it wasn't the case, for instance, as the ECCD. The first contracts we had with Netflix, we had views, and for some others it did not exist. So they were selling the works to a universe for which they didn't know what were going to be the results for the works. So that's a result of the copyright directive. And the second change in the audiovisual sector that we observe today is that the big international platforms are now losing money. I'm not referring to Netflix, but there was Disney that focused a lot on the platforms. They went back to the movie theaters. Now, there are some who are not going to lose because they work a lot on the videos on demand, like Amazon, but there are also other possibilities that have not been used. And at the same time, you can be interested in free services. When you have something that is delivered to you, you also have a musical service, a Prime Video service that is offered to you. And so this makes the calculations very difficult concerning the turnover and different contributions. So we can say that there is a slowing down concerning the platforms because there is the creation, the production, and new creations are needed in order to attract the subscribers so that the subscribers are going to stay months after months. It's not the same as Canal Plus, where in France, where it was very difficult to quit as a subscriber. And there were extraordinary sellers, so people, in fact, had 3 different subscriptions. Now, I'm going to ask our European MEP, Mr. Ibán GARCÍA del Blanco, what are currently the reflections in the Parliament concerning these topics, i.e. music and the audiovisual sectors? So the audiovisual sector, as it's been said, has many different rules, significant rules, and these rules have to be checked and balanced. They have to be monitored. And at the same time, in the field of music, there are 2 different expressions, because those who say everything is okay, let's not do anything, and those who say that there are some problems to be solved. Concerning discoverability, you talked about fraud. There is indeed a survey on the situation of fraud in that sector. So 2 different concepts in opposition, and quite a strong opposition. So what's the situation or the perception of the Parliament concerning all this?
Thank you very much. Good evening to everybody. Thank you for the invitation. I don't know if I dare to say a word on these topics, because are so complex, and in fact I'm here in the way of a listener more than a speaker. I'm going to, of course, to say some words, but this is an interesting debate. First of all, as you said, the 2 realities in the approach that are, from one way, the music sector, and in the other, the audiovisual sector, with different necessities, I think, and even a previous approach different as well. We have to solve another questions like what is exactly a European work, because this is the first of our reflections. But trying not to shed more mess in the debate, but to solve some of the features that are put on the table today. First of all, you know. Likely, or most of you know that I was appointed rapporteur of an initiative in incl committee about the situation of authors and cultural diversity in the European streaming market. We are deciding nowadays, if this streaming market refers to music solely, or refers to all the music and audiovisual sector. So we are in this discussion currently, and I can't tell you any other new on this for the moment. But I have to tell you that the tentative calendar for us, the presentation of the report will be at the end of May or early June, just to take it into account. And the vote will be before the summer break, if possible. If not, we'll go to September. You know that is quite controversial material. We were joking on this. Will be for sure a great consensus in our committee on these topics. So you can guess that it will be difficult to discuss about some of the main features. But we have to deal with it because at the end of the day we have to take notice that the motto of the European Union is united in diversity. So we have to grant it. In many ways, in every field, and the cultural field as well. So, as you said, digital has increasingly become an essential gateway to access culture, and today, streaming, as we were seeing today, is the dominant way for people to enjoy culture in Europe, while the numbers of users continues to grow and the services offers improve, the debate over markets sustainability grows in parallel. Firstly, we have to note that there are strong differences, as I said, across the cultural sectors. Besides, we have to listen to those actors, authors and creators alerting on the market's inability to generate sufficient value for them, despite the services user bases and offerings are expanding. Therefore, we can identify some common challenges we face. First of all, more research. We need data to improve discoverability. Two, more education with highly skilled cultural professionals so they can make the most out of this window of opportunity for the European cultural sector. And also education in the respect and protection of intellectual property rights. Three, need to support the local platforms and players. Four, keep working on and improving existing public policies and investment on reinforcing the European cultural scene. Five, talking on streaming, we need to reflect on transparency. I'm a big advocate on transparency. I have tabled proposals in all the digital files. I have worked in relation with artificial intelligence. You know, I'm quite involved in this debate in this institution. From the initiative legislative report, I was rapporteur, a European framework on ethical aspects of artificial intelligence, to the report of artificial intelligence in education, cultural and the audiovisual sector. Cultural diversity is a European value that must be safeguarded in the development and use of technologies. And also in reports looking into the best ways to support the cultural sector and the authors after the pandemic that has hit so hardly the cultural sector. I have always stressed the importance of streaming services being transparent and responsible in their use of algorithms. We were talking on algorithms today. So the access to cultural and creative content in various forms and different languages, as well as impartial access to European works, can be better guaranteed. Emphasizes the importance of transparency and accountability of algorithms used by video sharing platforms, as well as streaming platforms, in order to ensure access to culturally and linguistically diverse content. This is why I firmly believe we need to foster the debate about transparency, discussing how the algorithms work and how their parameterization affects content prioritization and thus the discoverability of European content. Content prioritization, this prominence. In Spanish, there's a direct translation, prominencia, no? I think that intuitively we understand very well what is the meaning of prominence. Another discussion is to have a common understanding on European works. There are already some debate on audiovisual works, as I said at the beginning. What about music as well? And just to sum up, cultural diversity is crucial to the success of the digital transition or of the creative and cultural sectors. The digital transition is a perfect window of opportunity to make that European culture, in all its diversity, has a prominent role in the digital world. I strongly believe we should reflect together on how to build a new strategy for diversity in Europe by promoting the visibility and discoverability of niche repertoires and European works. Together with the Cultural Creators Friendship Group and with my fellow MEPs, I want to work in promoting better working conditions for creators and well-functioning, fair and transparent streaming market. Today's roundtable are definitely an important step towards contributing to this objective. I'm happy, as I said at the beginning, to listen to all of your insights on the topic and to have a fruitful debate about fostering a sustainable future for the European authors and their creativity. And by the way, it seems that you knew that I'm going to work on this new file, so it is absolutely timely for me to have this discussion today. So thank you very much for organizing just today this roundtable, because it's so fruitful for me. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup. Alors,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think that the problem concerning the European audiovisual production is quite simple. We have a very good programming, a very diversified programming, but in terms of platforms, that is dissemination and broadcasting tools, were not so good. We're actually quite bad. And the result is that if the different European public services want to broadcast their works broadly, they have to put them on American platforms. So it's not only a regulatory issue. So our friend Barak Oksan wanted to add something. I hope you're not going to attack Spotify, otherwise we'll have to restart the whole debate again.
Streaming is a very important part of the music sector. I mean, they are the future. It is already the main exploitation, and it will be even more so in the coming years. So we need to grow together, and that's for sure. But the problem so far is they are no longer an alternative to piracy at the time as they started 15 years ago, which was the case. So now it's been more than 15 years, which is like the cat years, dog years in the music market. I mean, it's past now. They are mature, and now they are supposed to take more responsibility to make this market more valuable, also for creators. So we know it's growing, but that growth so far is not sufficiently reflected in the revenues, at least of the authors. So there is an issue there. We are not discussing this today. I'm just referring to that because it was discussed. Today is mainly on the discoverability. So on that issue, I think if there's one thing clear today, that all the cultural sector needs something on discoverability. Because in today's media environment, your success is about being able to be found. So everybody asks for this. And it's more so for the music streaming, because you saw the numbers. There are more than 100 million tracks or all those things. And you're saying, I mean, it's not a debatable thing only in music. If you ask the creators community in the audiovisual sector, they would all support this positive obligations of AVMST. If you ask the users, they will all be against. And then they would be happy to get away those provisions if they had the chance today. So, and it's not a surprise that, I mean, on the side of the services, that you will get a reaction like that. And also the music streaming service was a European market as it started, but now taking more and more by the other players like the Apple, Amazon, and Tidal. And I mean, it's a great example that Spotify is a European company that grew, but it's more and more a US company now it's operating. I mean, it's based on the US capital investment. It's based in the New York, at the headquarters. So it's not that like everything American is bad or everything European is good. It's just a fact. And we need to look at those things a little bit, and we need to take the actions. I mean, we are not speaking about the legislation right now, and it's true that music and audiovisual are so different from each other. It's not exclusive licensing. It's not that the catalog that you need to keep it there. And it's also a lot of the demand from the creators are obviously coming into direct access, but it's about the things that are not functioning well. And then fixing them would benefit everyone. And I think it's the time to do more things on that one, to look at it more seriously when we have all this, let's say, a little bit stars aligned at the European policy making, that there is an interest in the Parliament, in the Council, and at the Commission level. As regards to numbers, obviously I'm not making them up, Olivia, so they are coming from the studies commissioned by the Commission, or from the industry, or from joint research centers. And on the streaming fraud, the French study says up to 3%. With the data that they can identify, they say it's probably more, but they don't have sufficient access because not all the services are cooperating sufficiently. So, and it's already a lot. I mean, if your services fraudulent operation is more than 3%, I think everybody should be worried about that.
Merci. Alors, est-ce que n'y a pas de réponse? Si, une petite réponse aussi, quand même.
Petite réponse quand même.
A little reply. I'm not going to reply about everything. I would like to speak about the facts and figures. Let's carry out surveys. Let's study. Let's research to find out if there is a problem, to try and quantify a problem. We cannot use as a basis our subjective perception of possible problems. We need to talk figures and data. We're convinced that we have to look at the figures and analyze the possible problems and find out the extent to which regulation could help solve the problem. That's all I'm going to say. I like regulation, I like legislation, but that's another topic. Karim. Very briefly, about 2 points that may be on the border of the debate about discoverability, but that can have an impact in the medium to long run on the landscape. Nowadays, the citizens are invited to pay for their internet connection. They are going to subscribe to video streaming service, maybe with a big N, starting with a big N. Then they'll buy products on another platform, and they will subscribe to another streaming service. But then it might be that the same citizens like soccer and pays for premium TV channels that broadcast soccer games. Then they subscribe to an audio streaming service. Well, all these are bills that add up to each other. And that cultural diversity has a production cost, but also has a consumption cost that cannot be disregarded. If these contents are available, at some point, they need to be affordable. So it's also the question of the affordability of the diversification of the contents. This is a social aspect which has not been addressed so much, at least not at the European level and at the regulatory level. The second issue, and that topic has been broached when we talked about music, it's the issue of piracy and the growing space occupied by illegal content. Sometimes certain operators fight over 1, 2, 3 points of market share. But if we have 3, 4, or 5 points devoted to illegal pay TV that doesn't pay royalties to anybody, it's a net loss for everybody. And that issue was a bit hidden 4 or 5 years ago. Now it is growing in importance, and I think we really need a European coordinated approach to fight the proliferation of illegal pay TV channels that doesn't respect any rights, and the creators are indirect victims together with the platforms of that proliferation. We had to even sentence a candidate to the presidency of our republic for counterfeiting. He was guilty of counterfeiting. He had been using excerpts of films that had been made by someone called Eric Zemmour. But that was, let me close the topic. Anybody from the room? Thank you very much, Marc Dumoulin, Secretary General of EXA. First of all, I wanted to come back to the debate about the difference between the audiovisual sector and the music sector, especially if we focus on exclusivity. Today, a consumer may be the subscriber of different audiovisual platforms. Those platforms have increased their prices during these last years, which has not been the case of Spotify. But you can have users who subscribe to Amazon Prime, Canal Plus, Netflix, so they may subscribe. These users may subscribe to different services. It is not the case for music, because the same catalog is offered by the different music streaming services. It's about 10 euros. The monthly subscription is about 10 euros. That amount has not increased during the last 15 years. So it means a loss of profit, a loss of value of music because of the inflation rate. And we heard a lot about streaming. We heard about the lack of revenue, the lack of distribution, or the inadequate distribution. Olivier said that 70% goes back to the creator. I cannot let you say this. Out of the music streaming, 30% goes to the platform, 55% is for the label, and they pay back less than 20% to the artist and performer, and on the side of the royalties, about 15% go to copyright and less than 10% to authors. So it's not at all 70% that end up in the pocket of music creators. They go to the pockets of the label and to the platform. So if we speak about figures, let's have precise and correct figures. So I also wanted to refer to the work of the House of Commons in the United Kingdom about streaming. That work unfolded partly during the COVID times. Performers could not give concerts. They expected their payback from streaming. It's not at all the case today, because if a user pays 10 euros, there is €1 for the author and €1 for the performer. So the creators, there is some creator washing about what has been said.
Then I wanted to end with a comment concerning the discovery mode, because I've seen that Spotify, well, we should explain what is the discovery mode, because in exchange for visibility, the right holders, the authors, have to accept a reduction of their royalties, if I understood well what was said in the newspapers, of a reduction of 30%. And it's a scandal, according to me, because it's coming back to the 17th century, when an artist was told, go to a concert room, whatever, we won't pay you, but you will be visible. So we're coming back to that with the discovery mode of Spotify. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. But in the 17th century, copyright was not existing. It was invented a bit later. So anyway, so maybe you can react, and then we will have to stop the debates to give the floor to Mr. Jean-Luc Orgis for the conclusions of today's meeting. So very quickly, a few comments. The 70% paid by Spotify as paid to the sector of music is the case for all platforms. So I didn't say that it was only for the creators. Otherwise, I don't know how platforms would survive. But it is indeed distributed between the different right holders. The price of the platforms, as you mentioned, you should not forget that platforms are always in competition. We have TikTok, we have YouTube, different services, different forms of competition. Regularly, we try to increase the prices, and it was feasible and easy, we would do it. If it were easy, we would have done it, but we are fighting against our competitors, and there's also the fact that we have to pay the authors. Then I don't know how regulation would be able to settle all that. Then the discovery mode is indeed very interesting. There was a report that was produced on the algorithms that's very interesting, and I'd like to invite you to read that. It's UK Centre for Data Integration. It's a report on the algorithms. It's very interesting. And it's very assertive concerning the power of algorithms. But this report showed that finally platforms play a lot to the creators, and there's also a distribution that should happen between the music industry and the creators on the basis of contracts between them. So I'm not going to speak more, but most probably a lot could be said. So concerning prices, the cost of an audiovisual work or movie has nothing to do with the price of a music album, and it is because the platforms, well, they increased, the audiovisual platforms increased their prices, and normally, thanks to the legislation, we have incomes that are related to the profits, so the creators should be happy with that. and we're not interested in having prices reduced, because otherwise authors are going to have a lower remuneration, and it would be very complicated to produce works that are very expensive in some cases. So could you please come here for the conclusions? Could you come to the table? Yes, please come here to the table.
Very much. I will try to be very brief. We've lost some minutes, and then we have to hang out together and do some more bonding. So I would like to thank you all for your very important contribution. We have heard so many ideas and views about discoverability and ways forward. Indeed, the AVMS directive, the Media Freedom Act, and the other EU regulations may offer some opportunities to include the concept of discoverability of EU works into EU legislation. But on the other hand, please allow me to share my belief that although it is very important to work on specific regulations, as the ones I previously mentioned, the most important thing is to achieve, to have culture horizontally in all major priorities of any EU strategy. We need to clarify and shout out loud that the culture is the best vehicle to the digital, to the green, to any kind of transition, and most of all, to social cohesion and democracy. Culture is what shapes our mindsets and identities. Culture is what brings us and keeps us together. And culture is what can actually make Europe a much more important player in the world agenda. Europe's culture is of utmost importance, and this is what we need to highlight. European culture, on the one hand, is about heritage, which should be always supported and promoted, but it is also about current creative production. After all, current cultural works are the heritage of tomorrow. So, in my view, cultural European creations should be much more than discoverable, should be visible, should be obvious, and should be everywhere. Let me share a thought and an example. As an example, if you go to any small village, anywhere in Europe, even in a very small isolated island in Greece, and ask what New York looks like, everybody will have an answer. Will have an idea how New York looks like. And even no one has gone there. That is because of the presentation of the city in so many films and TV series and songs. So we must make sure that Berlin is also well known, as well as Athens, Rome, Madrid, Vienna, Lisbon, any European city, places, heritage, sites, music, customs, and all that shape our European diversity. This is what brings us and keeps us together, as I said before. So let's see how we can work together towards all these goals that were expressed today and how we will proceed from here. We can thank you again, and we don't forget, we stay together because we can go further. Thank you very much. And now we have the time to go for a little drink and discuss in person.